Out of all the fields of science, information related to exercise, training, nutrition, health seem to be the most controversial. I think there's a few reasons for this. Firstly, the studies within nutrition and health sometimes aren't very scientifically rigorous and they've got a lot of limitations. Secondly, anatomy and physiology are really complex subjects. You know, people spend their whole lives just studying one protein and there's thousands of them. So sometimes these areas can be oversimplified to the point where they are misunderstood and just sometimes incorrect. Lastly, these topics are very emotional, like with food, for example, related to climate change and ethics with killing animals or not. These can be very emotional topics, so sometimes people approach these topics with confirmation bias and they don't look at these subjects objectively. In relation to that theme, I wanted to cover creatine, and the reason I want to do so is because while creatine is arguably in the top 3 most researched supplements ever, there seems to be still a lot of misinformation about it and misunderstanding, so I wanted to cover that in today's video. For the sake of not boring the average viewer, I have put a description about the physiological mechanisms of creatine down in the description, along with the academic references I've read. But for those that want the short and concise version, essentially, creatine increases phosphocreatine within our muscles. That is a short but intense fuel source for muscle contraction. It seems that creatine has the reputation of just being a supplement for gym bros that want to get swole, but I think creatine personally is much more than that. For those that don't know, creatine is great for people that want to improve their strength, speed, power, and also muscle hypertrophy, or essentially muscle size. As well as this, there is literature supporting the fact that creatine can have cognitive benefits, and there is strong data coming out recently that creatine can also improve recovery with tissues that are damaged, such as musculoskeletal tissue and nervous tissue. I would like to think that most of us want to keep our independence as we get older, but unfortunately, until David Sinclair creates a vaccine for anti-aging, then unfortunately a lot of us will go through sarcopenia as we get older. This is the deterioration and reduction of strength and size of our muscles as we get older, and this will happen to everyone. And while it might not be a problem in our 30s, 40s or even 50s, as we get older and older, our strength reduces to the point where we can't put on our jacket anymore. We can't get out of bed or go on a walk, and these will dramatically reduce our quality of life. So considering the benefits of creatine, it's more than just getting swole or getting big. If taken throughout our lives, it can actually increase the health of not only our musculoskeletal system, but also neurological tissue or our nervous system. If anyone watching this video is mindful of their sleep, their food, or any other kind of daily habit to improve their health, then I think they should definitely consider creatine. I can give some recommendations here. However, when I looked into the literature, even though our collective knowledge is still growing, there does seem to be some holes in, our understanding here. Firstly, I want to be very clear. Despite marketing claims, there is no performance difference between different types of creatine from what I've seen. So if you want to save yourself money, get the cheapest version of creatine called creatine monohydrate and you should be good. Creatine can be found naturally in fish and meat and other animal products and other types of food. However, it's impractical to try and get your creatine through just having steaks, for example, so it makes sense to supplement creatine. One of the myths that I've seen about creatine is that people think it's also like caffeine, where you take creatine before a workout session, and it has acute, almost immediate benefits to performance. That's not the case. Creatine needs to be taken daily, consistently, if preferably, and by doing this, it will increase muscle saturation for creatine and therefore will improve performance over time. How long do you need to take creatine though to get to muscle saturation? Now this is controversial, it's very contextual. It depends on how much creatine is in your diet, because vegetarians, because they don't eat meat, will have less creatine from their diet, and it also depends on how much you supplement with. However, for those of you that are watching, the International Society of Sports Nutrition, called the ISSN, which is arguably one of the biggest globally recognized nutrition organizations in the world, especially for sport, they recommend having 0.3 grams of creatine per kilogram of body weight. So if you weigh 74 kilograms, for example, 0.3 times 75, and then you'll get your amount. And the idea is to take this for 5 to 7 days as your preloading phase to get to optimum muscle saturation earlier on. After these 5 to 7 days, then as the maintenance phase, it is recommended to take 3 to 5 grams of creatine. However, if you are a relatively heavy individual, especially men, who strength trains multiple times a week or just focuses on weightlifting quite a lot, I would recommend more 5 to 10 grams of creatine. With nutrition, it's always best for recommendations to be relative instead of absolute. So, for example, I recommended the preloading phase to be 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. The reason I didn't do that for the maintenance phase is because I could not find any literature on relative recommendations for creatine. So this is something that needs to be researched more into the scientific literature. You can take creatine in both a powder form and in tablets, but I personally prefer tablets because I don't like the chalky, powdery sensation I get with creatine when I mix it with water or juice. The scientific literature is also quite ambiguous in regards to when to take creatine in relation to your exercise session, so before, afterwards, or while exercising. So I would ignore this because it's probably not that important. As long as you're getting your daily amount of creatine, that is the most important thing. Lastly, some studies also recommend taking creatine with carbohydrate or protein. However, again, more research needs to be done on this area. As a disclaimer, before you take something or before you stop taking something, speak to your medical practitioner. I do this to protect me and also to protect you. With that out of the way, the literature shows that creatine is fine for most people. However, the literature is a bit controversial with regards to whether creatine should be taken if people have kidney dysfunction. So if you have kidney dysfunction in your family, or you think you might have something wrong with your kidneys, or even if you're just concerned about this, speak to a nephronologist who can give you advice on this. Secondly, a lot of literature has shown that creatine can increase dihydrotestosterone, also known as DHT. For those that don't know, DHT does a lot of things, such as increase beard growth, but it can also increase the rate of balding in men, depending on the susceptibility of the hair follicles on your scalp and face to DHT. So if your mother's father was bald or went bald fairly younger age, or you've noticed some kind of thinning in your hair, creatine might be the cause of accelerating balding, so take that into account as well. Other than that, I have not heard any kind of worries about creatine from quite reputable scientists and quite scientifically rigorous studies. If you enjoyed this video, then you might enjoy the video I did here talking about my insecurities with training and how I overcame my insecurity of being really skinny so I could train in more healthy ways. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you there. Adios amigos.